the session, The Past and Future of the World Council of Anthropological Associations. First of all, I would like to thank all my colleagues that accepted to present papers in this session. And the session will be followed by a lecture by Dr. Leslie Aiello. According to the schedule I have here, we're finishing at 14:30 this afternoon. And Dr. Aiello's lecture is going to be at 14:45, isn't that right, Junji? Yes. So the first part of this meeting is the session called From the Chair's Point of View, Recovering the History, Prospecting the Future. And I am the first one scheduled to present a paper, so I will immediately start. I dedicate this paper to the memory of Liz Bromfield, who was the president of the American Anthropological Association and one of the members of the Wcaa founding meeting in Brazil in 2004. In February 2003, I entered the office of the president of the Werner Grant Foundation for Anthropological Research in New York City. Dick Fox, who I had met when he was the editor of Current Anthropology, and I worked with him in Current Anthropology, greeted me with a smile on his face. In 2003, Dick, Arturo Escobar, and I were working together in the World Anthropology's International Symposium that was soon to happen in Italy. I had asked Dick an appointment because I had another subject I wanted to discuss. I told him, I didn't come here to ask for money. I came here to give you an idea. He said, I'm lost. Yes, he was. I was then the president of the Brazilian Anthropological Association, and I wanted to convene a meeting with 14 presidents of national and international anthropological associations in Brazil to discuss the state of the art of international anthropological politics and cooperation. Dick Fox immediately said, yes, that's great. I'll support this initiative. So I organized the international conference, World Anthropology's Strengthening the International Organization and Effectiveness of the Profession, that took place between June 9 and June 13, 2004, with the Werner Grant Foundation financial support. By that time, Arturo Escobar, Eduardo Restrepo, Marisol de la Cadena, and I, in the very beginning, had founded the World Anthropologists Network. Afterwards, Susanna Narosky joined our group, a network of individuals concerned with polarizing the exchange of anthropological knowledge on the global level in face of the growing Anglo-American dominance of our discipline's agenda. The fact that the founding members of this movement were Latin Americans needs to be briefly explored. They brought in different ways a critical Latin American cosmopolitan style to the blend that would define world anthropologies as a radical cosmopolitics. The very notion of Latin America supposes a cosmopolitanism, the main counterpoint of which is American imperialism. In spite of the continent's variety, the Latin American field of intellectual practices, to use the expression that Daniel Mato uses, implies a form of consciousness, a locus of enunciation made up of certain critical intellectual and political genealogies. More importantly, such intellectual practices are also performed outside the academic milieu, reflecting a preoccupation with the political usages of knowledge and involvements with different social sectors and movements, as well as interventions in public policies. Last but not least, the Latin American stamp meant that the world anthropology's movement was not guided by a multiculturalist agenda. Rather, it was influenced by the Latin American radical discussion on interculturality. In this perspective, the valorization of other anthropologies and anthropologies otherwise, to quote the title of a well-known Escobar and Restrepo's articles, published in Critique of Anthropology in 2005, the valorization of other anthropologies and anthropologies otherwise needs to be done concomitant to a critique of the conditions created by modernity and the coloniality of power that obliterated the production, validity, and visibility of other knowledges. Although the 2004 meeting was not an initiative of the World Anthropologies Network, since I'm radically engaged with this movement, I want to make clear that the idea of the Recife conference was much inspired and influenced by the World Anthropologies agenda. The conference had four major goals. First, to bring together anthropologists who are leaders of national and international organizations in an effort to construct new channels of intercommunication and cooperation. Second, to initiate a process that will deepen international cooperation in anthropology in a more cosmopolitan vein through the facilitation of conversations and networking processes that can lead to more heteroglossic communication and dissemination of anthropological knowledge. Third, to elaborate a collective proposal for international cooperation, so there was already an idea of doing something, which will serve as an initial international working document. So this is very prehistory of the Council, to be carried back to and discussed within the national and international anthropological associations represented in the conference. We didn't want to say, hey, we want to create something. We wanted to say, let's discuss it, but the idea was already to create something. We didn't want to frame beforehand the agenda, but we wanted to have a democratic discussion with all the members of the conference. Fourth, to participate in a symposium at the Brazilian meeting of anthropology, where the highlights of the conference as well as its resulting document would be presented and discussed. This is why the council was founded within the Brazilian meeting of anthropology. 14 representatives from anthropological organizations went to Recife. They were the presidents of the associations for Australia, Thomas Reuter at that point in time, Brazil, myself, Canada, France, India, Russia, South Africa, the UK, and the US. The presidents of the following international associations were also present: European Association of Social Anthropologists, International Union of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences, Latin American Association of Anthropology, and Pan-African Anthropological Association. The Japanese Society sent its Director of International Relations, at that time Professor Junji Koizumi, who currently is JASCA's president and the UAS Secretary General, as we all know. The conference was divided into two moments. The first and more intense one consisted of 3-day-long debates before the 24th biannual meeting of the Brazilian Association of Anthropology. After discussing several possible mechanisms and initiatives to increase international cooperation, participants decided to create the World Council of Anthropological Associations. The second moment consisted of a session within the Brazilian meeting on June 13th, 2004, where the founding of the WCAA was announced. I had the honor to be elected as its first facilitator, as the chair of the WCAA was then called. This term was the clearest indication that the WCAA wanted to be a network and not a new institution. My task was to jumpstart the network by disseminating the news of its existence, and more importantly, by starting a website. The appearance of the World Council was widely acclaimed everywhere. But there was an exception, the International Union of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences, the IUAS, of which I have the honor of being a vice president since 2009, was suspicious that the WCAA was created to compete with the union. The WCAA leadership knew it was not the case. In fact, the president of the IUAS was one of the participants of the Recife meeting. In a historic meeting in 2006 in an IUAS Pan-African Anthropological Association and Anthropology Southern Africa Congress in Cape Town, organized by Muggsy Spiegel, where is Muggsy? An encounter between the two leadership cleared things up. I vividly remember a comment made by Faye Harrison, that today everybody talks about this comment, and Faye, as you know, is today's IUAS president, that the WCAA was IUAS's best friend. The WCAA grew fast and steadily since 2004. It's now a recognized presence in global anthropological politics with 44 members from all over the world. The interest of this WCAA leadership in international academic politics was also expressed in 2009 when several WCAA leaders became members of the Executive Committee of the International Union of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences and started to further its reorganization by promoting a more democratic constitution in the successful World Congress in 2013 in Manchester. This new moment of the IUAS brings hopes that anthropologists can further consolidate their academic global exchange in a solid institutional environment open to the participation of colleagues from all over the world. The World Anthropologies Network and the World Council of Anthropological Association also inspired the creation by the American Anthropological Association in 2008 when Seta Low was the president of the American Association of the Commission on World Anthropologies. In 2010, during Virginia Dominguez's presidential tenure, it became a committee, a more permanent body of the association. Its objectives are, quote, to identify significant issues that are shared among anthropologists from different nations, develop clear objectives for drawing U.S. and international anthropologists together in a way that benefit anthropology globally, engage a diversity of international voices and perspectives, and involve both academic and applied anthropologists in this endeavor. End of the quotation. In 2014, just a couple of weeks ago, in response to the committee's suggestions, and ongoing negotiations for the past 4 years, the American anthropologists started a World Anthropology section. I thought it should be World Anthropologies and not World Anthropology. This is something we might want to discuss. The American anthropologists started a World Anthropology section to address, quote, the origins and ongoing concerns of anthropology around the world. It is clear to me that the WCAA is a success story. But the question now is, what do we do with its success? Although the WCAA has created many new opportunities for more heteroglossic conversations on the global level and the appearance of a new global leadership, we have to ask questions such as, which intrigues me.
Why the AAA, exactly the most powerful and central association, has been the only association to create a World Anthropologist Committee? That's a good question. Have we really improved the visibility of other anthropologists' production on a global level? How can the WCAA improve current global communication among anthropologists? Two factors allow me to remain optimistic. First, following years of internal WCAA debates and 3 open sessions organized by the CWA when I was on the committee with my friend Don, what's his last name? Brenis. Sorry. My friend Don Brenis. We organized 3 open sessions in AAA meetings with tens of editors of some of the main anthropological journals to discuss how to pluralize editorial policies regarding style and language. The WCAA launched its own online journal digitally that is co-edited by Gordon Matthews and I. So starting in 2012, digitally republishes in any language articles selected by anthropological journals. I invite you all to go to the digitally page. This kind of intervention in anthropological publishing is a particularly strategic effort because they allow for the exposure of the heterogeneity of contemporary anthropology. The second factor is that whatever happens to the ongoing negotiations between the WCAA and the UES, the 2 organizations have created a new synergy on the global level. Look what happened in the Manchester 2013 World Congress, so well organized by John Gladhill. Look what is happening in this Inter-Congress in Japan, so well organized by Junji Koizumi. The UAS meetings are also capable of providing opportunities for the WCAA leadership to meet and discuss the future of global anthropologies in a truly international environment outside of the sphere of influence of the traditional anthropological hegemonic centers. But I'm sure much remains to be done. The new endeavors will certainly benefit from what we have already accomplished, but will also depend on how capable of envisioning new pathways we and the younger leadership will be. Thank you very much. I now invite Junji Koizumi to present his paper.
Thank you. A technical problem is that this computer is not connected to the LAN. You know, mine is connected, but this one is not, because we had to save some money. All right. First of all, I'm sorry I could not circulate my paper beforehand. From the beginning, in Recife, on June 9th, in 2004, as Gustavo mentioned, when a meeting for the foundation of WCAA was convened by Gustavo Lins Ribeiro, I participated in WCAA first as international delegate of JASCA, then as a facilitator of WCAA, then as WCAA chair, and now president of JASCA, and also as secretary general of the other international organization, IUAS. I'm glad and appreciative of that I have been able to commit to WCAA and get involved in the development of WCAA and of the movement for world anthropologies, which has been empowered to a degree that we could not foresee and which is now getting momentum. The theme of this conference, IUS 2014, with Jessica is or was the future of anthropologies. And behind this theme was, of course, the notion of world anthropologies implicitly. The title of the Recife conference in 2004, World Anthropologies, Strengthening the International Organization and the Effectiveness of the Profession, epitomizes the spirit and the role of WCAA, and this has not and should never change, along with another feature of WCAA, which is collegiality. I recently produced a re-edited version of the video recording of this historic event with Gustavo Lins Ribeiro here, the convener of Recife Conference, who made the original video recording, and Itsushi Kawase, a visual anthropologist at the National Museum of Ethnology, who re-edited the video. I would like to show you just the beginning of this film, although some of you may already have seen it because we made it available online. So I just want to show you just a bit.
You would teach at the same time, I'm wanting more, well, what does this mean, in terms of how do you strengthen any kind of way? The association represent a larger society. So that we can extend and maybe continue with the sex. Vos, as presidente de América, Association Group 1 here, Group 2,
Okay, this is it. All right. I just wanted to show you the spirit or feeling of what that historic event was. Okay. Now, I wanted to well, after this epoch-making World Anthropology series, I mean, before this historic event, there was a notion of world anthropology. For example, the World Anthropology series started to be published in 1970s by Mouton and Aldine, the result mainly of the IUAS Chicago World Congress by Soltax in 1973, and then this publication series almost destroyed the publisher, as is well known. World Anthropology there was in singular, and anthropologies in plural were actively sought later by WAN, World Anthropologies Network, and one's purpose. You saw just a bit of that front page. purpose was to support the formation of a self-organizing world anthropologist network online. And of course, Gustavo was already involved in that. One aimed at the formation of the network that will constitute a dialogic space for discussing anthropology in its relation to a multiplicity of world-making processes and events, close quote. It explicitly attempted to create the network that will, quote, contribute to the development of a plural landscape of world anthropologies that is both less shaped by metropolitan hegemonies and more open to the heterographic potential of unfolding globalizing processes, close quote. This is from the homepage. One homepage suggests the underpinning philosophy or activity of the network, which is, quote, the constant planetary interlocking of locally significant notions aimed at producing shared yet differentiated anthropological practices, close quote. This is a very nice way to deal with the relation between the global or cosmopolitan orientation on the one hand and the local or parochial orientation on the other. It continues, quote, eventually the network should move toward planetary modes of inquiry while enabling plural, place-centered, political, theoretical visions and concerns, and without imposing uniform agendas or styles. Necessarily multilingual and organized and effected virtually as well as through concrete and hopefully intentionally unorthodox events. The network will also aim at producing alternative research and funding practices, emphasizing collective research agenda and authorship. And authorship while remaining sensitive to place-based particularities, close quote. This is a nice way to deal with the relation between global and parochial orientations, and probably I basically share these views and values. But I'm not sure how concretely we can achieve them. A planetary modes of inquiry that is enabling place-centered visions without imposing uniform agendas is nice and perhaps easy to say, but it should not be easy to bring them about. The issue is how we can do that, and we can come about achieving this objective. Creating online network is one way to do it, and one has been successful in this regard. But getting different anthropologies together and to get the discussion going is certainly a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition. I've seen various discussions among different anthropologies, and probably we became different through them, and we have started to escape from uniform agendas or cycles to some degree. But I feel that collecting and mingling of diverse elements from the world anthropologies has not yielded something very productive so far. We have only fulfilled the necessary condition. I quoted from one at length because I think we need to think if the Wcaa members share these views and values. Certainly, some of us share them, but theoretically at least, Wcaa covers all anthropologists in all its member associations, and it's logically impossible that all share them in common. While Wcaa shares certain values with this non- or anti-hegemonic approach based on multiple and diverse-centered visions, Wcaa needs to think and discuss to what extent it should be or it should not, it should or should not have those specific views. I myself believe that Wcaa should be a pragmatic organization rather than with one with a clear theoretical orientation in order to achieve its full potential. Its potential lies in its political power, I believe. I think the best quality about WCAA is that it can be politically powerful in the best sense of the term. I do not know if Gustavo remembers this, but this is something we talked about in our private conversation. It does not mean that we should have a specific political orientation towards some targets for the materialization of certain values, because we do not know what those targets are yet. We do not have shared values or common objectives yet, at least at this moment. But the unique feature of WCAA is that it's a collection of presidents of national, regional, and international associations in anthropology. The degree and qualities of power of presidents differ from association to association, and some presidents may have a real transcendental power, while others may be just a coordinator. But some sort of concentration of means and resources to move the associations to some direction should be always there in any association as far as it has a president or chair or director. Networking and concentrating of these concentrations means resources. Networking and concentrating of these concentrated means and resources has a potential. To my mind, this potential is the best quality about WCAA.
Junji, you have 2 minutes, sorry.
2 minutes, okay. All right. This means that we need to connect presidents and past presidents of member associations closely together, not in a virtual space, but in not in a virtual space or formal bind, but in actual face-to-face interaction in person. It might be too optimistic, but bringing those means and resources of member associations together should itself be meaningful and have a lot of potency. But I have also seen shortcomings of this system unique to WCAA, with which I gather and connect, connect presidents of the Association of the World. The problem is the rotation of international delegates, because the international delegates, the president have to leave after 2 years, or after 3 years at most. This not only creates the problem of continuity, because WCA lacks firm theoretical or ideological basis. More importantly, this rotation leads to a waste of human resources, to my mind. Perhaps the word waste is too strong a rendering, but I want to use this word just because I have come to know so many good people through the activities of WCAA. Those international delegates, at least generally, are talented people with skills, experiences, resourcefulness, visions, their own networks, power, and just a wonderful human quality. The systemic flaw at present is that international delegates are usually gone when their terms end. I have seen many people who wanted to work more but left just because their term as president back home ended. Some of them remained in the organizing committee and so on, but not many. We need some way to retain these talents and maximize their potential. At least we need to form a group of those people according to their interest in research and practice. And for this, I think IUAS commissions should be able to provide that kind of possible place to work. I'm not saying because I'm committed to the IUAS, but logically it's quite rational. I mean, it's quite rational. IUS commissions are freely formed for any academic or practical purpose based on the intention, willingness, and originality of those who propose them. If we have those talented past presidents at the core for these new, renewed, or current commissions, we will have a real possibility for development. Well, I have got a bit more to say, but I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Junji.
Now, this presentation draws on my experience as a founding participant, executive officer, and for 3 years as chair of the Wcaa. In 2009, I also became a member of the executive of IOAES, and later currently its senior vice president. These two organizations together form the institutional platform for a new paradigm of world anthropologies, which redefines our discipline based on cultural diversity and political equality within our ranks. And while Junji earlier remarked that perhaps world anthropology is not so much a theoretical platform for everyone involved, I think those principles of cultural diversity and political equality within the discipline, within the organizations, is fundamental, and we all do share that. Now, what I'd like to share with you today are some thoughts on the history of Wcaa and some ideas about how we can further promote diversity and equality within the discipline. First, I'd like to say a few words about the foundation of Wcaa and its relation to IOAES. The Wcaa began with a meeting of 14 anthropological association presidents in Recife in Brazil in 2004. The meeting was conceived and organized by Gustavo Lins Ribeiro and Paul Little, at least that's what it says on the program, though Paul didn't remain involved, with the aim of exploring possibilities for greater collaboration between diverse anthropologies. Participants were asked to submit their ideas in writing before the meeting. Organizer and then ABA President Gustavo Lins Ribeiro explained his objectives as follows. I quote, "I was invited for a working breakfast in the 2002 AAA meeting in New Orleans. It was an interesting occasion to meet colleagues working in metropolitan anthropologies. But the issue is how to promote more diversified meetings. Furthermore, besides these much-needed informal opportunities to know of other associations' characteristics, I feel we need something more structured. Perhaps the creation of a committee of presidents of associations within the IOAES would provide for an instance where more concrete articulation could happen. Another possibility would be the creation of a website financed by all associations and dedicated to the dissemination of international anthropological knowledge." In my own paper, I went a step further by proposing the formation of, I quote, "an organizational structure on a global scale, such as a permanent council of national presidents." And I further observed that, quote, "I would like to emphasize very strongly the power a global communication network in anthropology would have." We were dreaming back then. Imagine being able to reach the presidents of all or most national organizations with a single email, and each of them being able to reach all of their members by forwarding that email. In combination with a global organization framework, such as a Council of Representatives, where in matters of shared interest would be discussed and articulated, this kind of communication flow would have a major role in encouraging and facilitating the creation of global research networks and other collaborative projects. Other delegates made more specific proposals for collaboration. For example, CASCA President James Waldron suggested that, quote, "associations consider multilateral agreements that offer reduced membership and conference rates to paid-up members of other national associations. Information exchange could also be facilitated by the establishment of a global virtual anthropology association, which could act as a clearinghouse for information on the national associations. And this organization could be funded on an ongoing basis by structured contributions from member associations on behalf of their members. Access to the global association would then be a benefit of membership in the national associations, an important value-added benefit of membership." These quotes show that Wcaa was an idea whose time had come. There was a lack of an umbrella organization or World Council of Associations. The IOAES was not seen as providing such a facility. For example, Indian Anthropology Society President Ajit Danda observed that, I quote, IOAS, with its contemporary preoccupations, does not seem to be adequately prepared to undertake the responsibility thus outlined. In fact, they seldom took the national anthropological societies or associations into much confidence. Now, Luis Vargas, then the president of IOAS, was present at the meeting. He argued that, I quote, the union itself consists of national and international organizations in more than 50 countries in all parts of the world, together with some hundreds of individual members. Each country is represented by a delegation numbering not more than 6 individuals, chosen by the anthropologists of the country concerned on the Permanent Council of the IOAS. The Permanent Council is the governing body of the union, each national delegation having a single vote in its decisions. Briefly, our union can serve as a forum for anthropologists and anthropological societies from all countries. Note that this statement did not acknowledge the weakness of the now defunct Permanent Council, namely the fact that national delegates were not the elected presidents of the national associations, but rather persons selected from among active members of the IOAS only, who happened to be from a given country, but had no political mandate whatsoever to represent those countries. In short, IOAS represented its own diverse membership, but not national anthropologies, except as a sample. And to make matters worse, its formal paid-up membership had shrunk to a very small number indeed, due to some poor management or a failure to adapt to the possibilities of managing membership electronically. In addition, there was no signal that the IOAS would welcome the Council of Association Presidents to be created and accommodated through a fundamental structural reform. In short, the UN-like representational structure of the IOAS was not geared to facilitate the ambitions of a G20-like heads of associations councils about to come into existence. UN-like, that is, in the sense that most national representatives on the Permanent Council were unknown to their own compatriots, just like most people would not be able to name the person representing their country in the UN because they never voted for them or elected them. I met with Gustavo before the meeting, I'll never forget that, and we spent hours in discussion over this proposal to create a World Council of Association Presidents. We were doubtful that such an ambitious goal could be achieved and felt that national associations, for example, might fear a loss of sovereignty. We later discovered, however, that there was enthusiastic support from the whole group. Incredibly, we managed not only to agree on the creation of a council, but to write and sign a founding agreement, essentially the first constitution of WCAA. Significant amendments were later added in further meetings to do with governance and designed to protect and permanently enshrine principles of egalitarianism and participatory democracy. Gustavo was elected the first chair, succeeded by Judy Koizumi and myself, and then Polish Association President Michał Bukowski. The council grew slowly at first, then rapidly. Today, 10 years later, it includes more than 50 national and regional associations, or rather their presidents. While many countries still lack an association, the Council already includes elected representatives of the vast majority of the world's professional anthropologists. Some of the leaders of the WCAA later also became involved in a move to reform the IOAS following the World Congress in Kunming. I was eventually to write a first draft of a new constitution, which ended up abolishing the now unnecessary and superseded institution of the Permanent Council. At the same time, as it does sort of turn its back on internationalism, you might say, the IOAS became for the first time a fully global organization with a post-Westphalian character, an incredibly diverse and now much larger global community of individual anthropologists, no longer distinguished by nationality. This model is truly planetary and designed to serve as a meeting place for all the world's anthropologists. Wcaa membership, of course, is not at all accessible to individual anthropologists. It is purely an international council of elected national presidents. The two organizations' structures are thus very different and reflect somewhat the ambiguity of today's world, wherein Westphalian and post-Westphalian forms of associations coexist. This is the status quo, but negotiations are now in progress to bring these two sister organizations into closer cooperation. Given their different structural designs, they fulfill different and fully complementary roles vis-à-vis the discipline's needs. Across the spectrum, too broad for a single executive committee to manage. There's almost no functional overlap at present, and hence no conflict or competition. However, there is very much scope for joint undertakings and a practical need to do so, especially in view of the difficulty of obtaining adequate funding for such projects. Now, I don't know how much time I have, about a few minutes?
Yeah, let me see.
Yeah.
4 minutes.
Okay. I wanted to say a few words about the World Anthropology's agenda in Wcaa and IOAS. Post-colonial critiques of anthropology have rightly criticized the discipline's involvement in classical colonialism. This kind of awareness raising is important because critical reflection on the history of our discipline leads to honesty, and honesty gives us the freedom to change. But unfortunately, our involvement in hegemony did not stop with the reflexive turn of the 80s, and probably never will, so long as hegemony continues to characterize world politics. It's very difficult to escape that societal context. What international anthropology can do, however, is to eliminate, or at least ameliorate, inequality in the discipline itself. Recent debates under the heading of world anthropologies have highlighted that we have until now maintained a range of hegemonic structures of our own within the discipline. And I would like to name 3 of them. One is the 20th century hegemony of British American anthropology, based on the preeminence of English as a universal language, underpinned by the dominant military and economic position of the Anglosphere nation-states. I'm not going to go into detail. A second hegemony of knowledge in our discipline has to do with the means of knowledge production. It is based on the domination of print media by journal and book publishers based in affluent Western countries, most of whom are now corporately owned rather than controlled by academics. A third form of hegemony persists in anthropology because there are vast disparities in a degree of visibility of different anthropological communities. The unique features of these national and regional anthropologies need to be not only maintained but also appreciated much more than is currently the case. I believe it is through a politically conscious international anthropology that we are obtaining the means to reform the discipline on a foundation of celebrating cultural diversity in the practice of anthropology itself. It presents us with an opportunity to speak with one voice also, and thus to make representations to other international bodies or to private governments or corporations. This is already happening, and for the first time it can happen because we have a fair and transparent democratic structure in place that gives anthropologists the opportunity to speak with one voice. So you might say, to conclude, that anthropology is finally catching up with globalization, and it's about time. I believe it will be our greatest challenge in the coming years to provide a model of what globalization could be at its very best, to provide a model of how humanity can come to appreciate its unity. its need to speak in one language, and its need also to speak in many tongues and to think in a wide array of different epistemological and cultural frames. It is a massive challenge and would be even if anthropologists were running the world. We are not. But we can be exemplary. We do have the training and the professional ethos to be exemplary in these matters. But we need to put our knowledge into practice, first of all, by bringing our own political affairs in order, by making anthropology open, free, and equal. Then we can genuinely hope that others may listen to us and emulate us. Why would they listen to us? Because if we can demonstrate a global consciousness based on solidarity and equality in diversity, it means that others can also achieve this kind of consciousness. That global cooperation is not just a dream, but already, on a small scale, a reality. And we better hurry up, lest our efforts towards building global cooperation are overtaken by a rapidly worsening global ecological crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. What can I say? First of all, I should say that I feel like a dwarf on the shoulders of giants that preceded me. And I won't be that detailed in my history, but I try to summarize it in some way, because this is about histories of world anthropologists. We are all products of the history, times, and societies in which we live in. Anthropology is not an exception. The same applies to Wcaa. In order to show it, I will make it in 4 steps. Step first, my concise rendition of the history of anthropology. Now you will get a lecture on the history of anthropology. 2 major traditions of the discipline can be distinguished, both of which were exceptionally well articulated by George Stocking: empire-building anthropology and nation-building ethnology. These 2 traditions are usually associated with different countries and regions. At the advent and in the first decades of anthropology and ethnology in the Northern Hemisphere, the first one has been especially conspicuous in the Anglo-American world with its colonial extensions, while the second one in continental Europe. Of course, the parallel existence of both of them in one region or country, to a certain extent proportionate to the colonial might of a given nation, was often the case. Imperial nations have had internal nation builders, and the scholars of small nations have also practiced an imperial type of anthropology. France, Germany, Russia, and later Japan might serve as a notable example of such a mixture. World War II, due to the racist connotations of the continental ethnology and its horrible nationalists, weakened the ethnological tradition in the capitalist world, although the conquest of the Anglo-Saxon tradition faced fierce resistance in some regions, such as Scandinavia or Germany, which is often visible until today. Triumphant social cultural anthropology was carried across the so-called Third World, Asia and Latin America, as well as Africa. At the same time, World War II led to the reduction of anthropology to a vulgar Marxist-driven evolution of anthropology in the Soviet Empire, and to the lessening of ethnology to descriptive ethnography and folklore in its then satellite states. And I have to say it as a person coming from this region. These post-war processes enabled anthropologists to look upon ethnologies, both in the West and in the East, and, as it later turned out, both before and after 1999, as living skeletons of the past, as backward anthropologists. And this is just a citation that somehow shows it. This French and Anglo-Saxon style anthropology expanded to new territories after the collapse of communism. Post-Cold War anthropology developed. Like global and neoliberal capitalists, it victoriously entered new territories, neglecting everything it encountered. At first, it was ignorant of local scholarship and did not even bother to consult it. Step 2, emergence of Wcaa as the resistance to domination. The domination of central anthropologists has led, unavoidable as a matter of sociological rule, to resistance. Prior to the emergence of the Wcaa, critical anthropological movements within anthropology had not been concerned with power relations and hierarchies of knowledge within the discipline itself. The two major self-reflexive ways were concerned neither with local anthropological knowledge nor with structural determinants of existing inequalities in knowledge production. First, those who in the 1960s and 70s criticized anthropology for its complicity with colonialists like Delheims, Diamond and others, focused on Western anthropology itself. Second, the advocates of the postmodern self-reflexivity of the 1970s and 80s, Clifford, Marcus and others, addressed the issue of knowledge elicitation in the practice of Western-style anthropology. The significance of theoretical insights produced beyond the English, French, or sometimes German academia was completely ignored by them. The relations with and potential of local knowledge producers in the society studied was not addressed at all. They represented metropolitan provincialism, like Lins Ribeiro and Escobar call it, in its pure form. This blindness could be witnessed even in the regions where a strong ethno-anthropological tradition existed. Central Europe, again, was such a case for a long time. The word anthropologist movement can be seen as the next step in the evolution of critical thinking in anthropology, with clear political aims. I argue that the ultimate reason for this was post-1989, post-Cold War, thorough neoliberal globalization, and the concomitant further expansion of dominant Anglo-Saxon anthropology. At the same time, when IUAS was not properly serving the cause of plural, not to mention transnational anthropology, Wcaa was the first organized resistance to Anglo-American hegemony. Some conspicuous characteristic of word anthropologies can be identified. First, the ideas were put forward by scholars trained in the West, mostly in the US. Several of them came from Latin America, while others from the peripheries of the dominant Anglo-Saxon anthropology, such as Australia and South Africa. One can say that history of word anthropologies replicates a trajectory of many other emancipatory movements. So you have, group in itself that feels uncomfortable then, but just feels, not. Then there is a consciousness raising. So the group in Recife, these were, for example, Gustavo, Thomas, Junji, and many others. So I don't know who is Marx, who is Engels, who is Trotsky, but these were these consciousness raisers. And then you need a mobilization of the masses, that is other anthropologies. It was up to intellectuals trained in the power centers to formulate emancipatory thoughts. They were able to articulate problems, raise awareness, and initiate mobilization. Second, the brothers and sisters in arms opposed to Anglo-American hegemony among the members of a highly self-conscious intellectual traditions, above all Francophone one, the Lausanne Manifesto is an example, quickly joined the force. Several allies within the dominant anthropology who opposed metropolitan provincialists also came to the fore. And this is this issue of many American Anthropological Association presidents. Later, they all were joined by the ignored and alienated traditions in the new post-communist territories, which up to the point merely impulsively resisted domination, as well as by many other dispersed traditions across the globe. This is why now we have close to 50 associations in WCAA. Step 3, the uniqueness of WCAA. The word anthropologist movement also differs greatly from the classical post-colonial critique and subaltern studies. The celebrated representatives of the latter, usually coming from South Asia and Africa, Spivak, Bembe, and others, were co-opted into or encompassed by the Western academia, both intellectually and institutionally. Word anthropologist differs also from such radical undertakings as the decolonizing perspective represented by Minorio, Grossvogel, and others, and the claims for a radical decolonization of knowledge by the total rejection of epistemological Eurocentrism. The word anthropologist perspective has always been less radical, more productive and pragmatic. Enough is to say that the movement doesn't repudiate the Western episteme as such, nor the anthropological ideas and practices invented in the West. It merely resists the domination of one or, at best, few intellectual traditions and their hegemonic position. In several respects, the main goal or mission of the word anthropologist movement remains unchanged. The World Council of Anthropological Association is and this is, well, actually, Wcaa aims, is a network of regional, national, and international associations. This is this pragmatics. And it is interested in debating a diversity of views and perspectives, serving as a forum for communication, discussing how the profession can be best respond to contemporary challenges that are themselves often the product of the forces and relations beyond the level of individual nation-state, facilitating the dissemination of anthropological work in a multiplicity of languages to improve knowledge of anthropologists, counteracting the hegemony of English-based knowledge production, working to improve the profile of image of the discipline through various forms of public engagement, issuing public statements that reflect anthropological knowledge on issues such as the rights of indigenous and minority groups, and issuing, there is misspelling, statements on matters of worldwide professional concern. And this is a kind of an extract, maybe a bit transformed from current Wcaa constitution. What should be done? Step 4. At the same time, the Wcaa has reached a point in which some of its aims need to be re-emphasized, while some new incentives, both intellectual and pragmatic, are necessary or even urgent. Let me start with the first one, as usually you start with the first. A focus on the inequalities, domination, and hegemony in knowledge production is still valid. How can hierarchies be undermined? In Manchester in 2013, I presented several diagrams that graphically present what should be done. Well, I don't want to repeat myself, but I think that at least two or three pictures are important, and I will somehow cite them again. So this picture of Hall of Mirror, as well as the flow of anthropological knowledge, is something that we should keep in mind. The point is that traditions involved may represent different research or even conceptual paradigms, use different vocabularies and conceptual languages. Word anthropologists comprise a system of knowledge exchange resembling a hall of mirrors in which we look at each other and at the same time can see ourselves. So this is this kind of, I really like it, self-reflexivity. Simultaneously, the flow of ideas de-essentializes the anthropological map and brings the thought to thought, a circulation system of all possible traditions produced anywhere in the world. Both steps undermine the established hierarchies and hegemonies. As far as subaltern anthropological traditions are concerned, we can count on understanding and active participation, although the circle of activists is still limited. Look at this room now. I mean, there is a number of people, but these people, we can see each other at many places. So this is still a close circle. And we definitely need to engage more people, but as you know, it's very difficult. But now it's also the major task to convince anthropologists from the dominant traditions that it is also for their own and the whole discipline's good to do everything possible to make anthropology equal and truly transnational. The reason is pragmatic, since it enhances the discipline's profile. It is also cognitive, because addressing the issue from only one cultural perspective is limited and poor. Reference to other traditions, especially the one in which the studies are carried out, is a must that is slowly but steadily accepted. What I have in mind that, let's say, there is an American anthropologist going to, let's say, Slovakia and not even reading any single anthropological production from Slovakia. And I know that in some centers of knowledge production, students are actually advised not to consult local scholarship because it would badly influence their view of the society they do study. And last but not least, it is a moral obligation towards fellow anthropologists to consult this local scholarship. Well, it is up to us whether WCAA's stand will be, we care about anthropology, or who cares about anthropology. Thank you very much.
I mean, I should, just so I don't take much time, I need to, I don't know if I apologize is the right reason, but I've taken a very different tact, and I want to say for those of you from the IUAES, I'm very grateful that you came. Thank you so much. And those from the WCAA as well. Sunday morning is not a very good time to have this kind of session, I really think. And I've taken a very practical, role, not a historical, not anything, but trying to really look at the WCA as it is today. And I'm trying to get so that I can also see the board. I'm going to look at the tensions, uncertainties, and potential dangers of WCAA's transformation now at the 10-year period. I'm going to talk about organizational change from a group of national, international anthropological associations to a kind of representation of world anthropologies. Looking at intellectual and associational change and rethinking how we move ahead to reformulate the future. Let me see if I've got this right. All right, so there are a number of different kinds of tensions and uncertainties. Again, my apology is that some of the audience that I thought would be here is not here. And so for some of you, I'm not sure that, that this is fairly specific, not very general. But within the WCAA today, we have a number of tensions and uncertainties that we are facing at this moment, at the 10-year period. The social relations change with growing number of member associations. We've gone from 14 to 45, 46, depends on how you count it. We are facing a lack of adequate funding mechanisms for meetings and professional services. There's very high turnover, it's been referred to in the association representatives. Presidents change all the time, and therefore we have short institutional memory of members and no mechanism yet to counter that. We have the increasing expenses for individual organizations to attend, to send representatives to meetings, such as a meeting here or a meeting in Taiwan. We have language considerations that Monica and others will talk about, and the dominance of English in order to communicate and what that does, and also the whole problem or tension of what is the future of world anthropologies as an academic subject. We're also going through organizational change, and this I'm turning to Ed Lebow, because I'm hoping you're going to help us with this, is how do you transform a network of associations, which was how Junji, Gustavo, Thomas, and others began it, to become a representative association. In other words, a kind of representation. I don't think it's the same thing. I think there are increasing demands on leadership, and they're expanding, and I feel the pressure of that, as does Mikel and those who will come beyond us. They're expanding, and we're requiring more professional assistance. We don't have that kind of professional assistance. There's increasing difficulty of an active exchange by email, blog, or website, which we've all talked about, that this is so great. It's great, but it's not working. That we cannot reach our members quickly, efficiently. It doesn't turn into a dialogue. Emailing 45 people in a group email does not create a discussion. We all know that. There's changing motivation to volunteer as this council of associations grows larger. Volunteerism seems to be seems to have worked better when you're 14 than when you're 45. I think that that's a problem. Leadership has difficulty reaching representatives. Oh, I sort of said that. I'm sorry, that seems repetitive. And the increasing size of the organization wasn't accounted for in the original plans and bylaws. Am I right, Gustavo, that really... Yeah. Well, it's grown. I mean, that's for sure. One thing that we want to make quite clear, you realize in 10 years we went from 14 to, as I said, 44, 45, 46, something like that. That's a lot of growth in a 10-year period. And then there are also intellectual and associational challenges. You know, please watch the time, because I'm not. How can we maintain world anthropology's framework in the context of intellectual and capitalist imperialisms? It's not just the kinds of hegemony that Mikhail is talking about. We really also have to think about the role of capitalism in the production of knowledge and these kinds of things. Do we have a vision of a global anthropological future? What would a world anthropology look like as opposed to world anthropologies? I mean, are there some kind of this kind of tension? Do we have themes, ideas, and ethical concerns in common? I've sort of heard the answer being that maybe we don't. I'm not as convinced. I think there are some common themes, but what are they? And do we need to identify our commonality as well as our differences as we move forward? I don't think we have done an adequate, I think it's again a challenge. It's one of our conflicts and tensions. Okay, so solutions and ideas. This is just brainstorming. One solution I'm saying is to think much more broadly about integrating world anthropologies into all aspects of anthropological life and not just at the level of an association or an association of associations. I'm proposing, and this is purely speculative, but thinking about integrating world anthropologies into theory and practice in at least 4 ways, and I think others of you in the audience probably could think of other ways, but certainly through training, through infrastructure, through publications, and through non-university organizations. So let me just take those in turn. Influencing anthropological training. BA, MA, and PhD level curriculum and programs. Now this is something I know the CWA, do we have any CWA members here? Okay. Has certainly been taking it on through the AAA, and we have certainly talked about doing that in conjunction with Wcaa, but this is something that could move to a much higher priority in terms of our real mission, which is really to promote world anthropologies and its understanding. We could develop continuing education and certification programs in world anthropologies. We could sponsor international summer schools, not maybe organizing them ourselves, but WCAA-affiliated programs in different parts of the world that would really introduce students to world anthropology in a greater way. We could think about trying to change tenure and promotion requirements to include international participation and publication in them. Now, maybe I'm speaking from a very US point of view by doing that, but from whatever positionality you're in, I think the idea of international participation being important is probably not recognized. And we could have faculty-led and non-faculty-led exchanges with non-university organizations for internships in international applied projects. Integrating into anthropology's organizational infrastructure. Now, a lot of this we've done, so some of it we've done. We have we have programs in different meetings all over the world. We are doing that. We could, however, as Junji has done here, have displays, WCA displays, brochures. Sounds corny, it does disseminate information. I proposed newsletters. Maybe we could have a WCAA column in more newsletters. We have one in the AN, that's the Anthropology Newsletter of the American Anthropological Association. Are there other newsletters? Could we have similar columns in those newsletters? Websites, we talked about more links. photographic expositions of our multiple anthropologies. They're saying in Taiwan they have a competition every year of the best photograph, you know. Could we do the same thing looking at visual representations of world anthropologies? Mentorships between WCAA members and students. New organizational structures, including more international faculty on committees and boards, and other specialized strategies. Integrating WCAA into external infrastructure. The first was kind of internal structure, if I'm being clear, more within the academy, again, towards training. Develop a plan for the relationship of WCAA and IUAES. We're working on it, so moving right along. Develop greater clarity about the relationship of WCAA to its member association. That's been brought up a number of times. I don't think we still have a clear enough plan of how WCA really services, offers, what's the word? Well, offers support, services, funding if necessary to its member association. Develop a plan to propose WCAA to position WCAA in other international social science forums. That's something that you may not know, but Thomas Reuter has really been very active in. But there are other international programs that we could be involved in, and develop ways that we could help the visibility of member associations within their own nations' regions as offering applied anthropological expertise, which we haven't been touching on a lot today, but as we know, certainly half of all anthropologists today practice outside of the academy, and that can be another function. Expanding publications, I don't know how much time I have. I don't need to go on. We've started Deja Lu. It's one of the best things we did. Can we have a newsletter? Can we increase WCA sponsored articles? Huh? Oh, I've got plenty of time. What about a monograph series? We've started. A link to geographical area newsletters, sort of thinking regionally. A link to other sections, newsletters and their publication systems. Expand our media connections. And have special issues of journals, which we have worked on. But there's a lot we can do in the publication area, and that was one thing I think that'd be good to discuss, because a number of our first speakers were really saying that WCAA's role, major contribution as a sort of somewhat a democratic insofar one vote, one association, local news, and that therefore it's a kind of political role. And I think that's really important for us to decide. Is there a political role, but is there not also this world anthropology's, global anthropology intellectual role that goes into training at the same time? And are we trying to do both at the same time? Is that part of the problem? Okay. Alliances with non-university organizations. I was speaking to Bill Davis, who's the previous executive director of the American Anthropological Association, just brainstorming with him, and he's saying that, you know, you're not really linking up with everybody you could. I mean, universities don't have a lot of money, okay, and it's hard to get them to send people, but there are all kinds of research institutes and centers. There are museums and material culture sites and programs. There are NGOs. There are international and governmental agencies. There are public-private partnership organizations, and on and on and on, that we could be creating relationships with. We wouldn't do it with, I'm not meaning all at the same time. We would pick one or two that someone was interested in. But that these are other ways to get support, but also other ways of pushing the message that world anthropology makes a difference, and also, I know that I'm looking at Greg, but you know, can make a difference in the world, and those kinds of linkages might push us in a slightly different direction, not just in training, but also in terms of practice. We could have WCAA-sponsored public programs in museums, in galleries. Some of you know I'm also an artist, so the art has to somehow come in there. In conferences, and of course in virtual meetings, which I think is really our future. You know, doing much, much more virtually, doing much more by Skype. Okay, so in conclusion, this is a rethinking, a kind of practical rethinking of how we move ahead. And that sort of summarizing. Let's think about how we can maintain the richness of world anthropology's diversity through publications and training strategies. Develop a global anthropology that allows for political action without sacrificing a diversity of views and perspectives. That's the tension I'm talking about between speaking as one and speaking as many, without silencing anyone in that process. Considering new ways of framing the local global issues through notions of translocality, transnational relationships, multivocal concepts and vocabularies, and some of you have heard me speak about that yesterday. Employ the concept of global. I know a lot of people don't like it, maybe you can come up with a better, but the local global, to produce a better formulation of the local global continuum, because I think that's also stumping us too, because we're really in that. We're in that local global continuum, and that's the difference between our member associations and our broader ones. And finally, just remember that the local and the global are both present at the same time, space, place. So as we work towards this, we will be making an intellectual contribution to our understanding of time and time-space sort of continuums, even as we do our political work. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Junji, Thomas, Michal, and Seta. These are the people that are, as we say in Brazil, are carrying the piano. And without their work, we wouldn't certainly be here. Before passing the word to Leslie Aiello, the president of the Wenner-Gren Foundation, I have to make an announcement. Is that Professor Francine Saillant, our Canadian colleague and a former Cascas president, has thought, and I thought it would be a great idea to publish a book from this session, and she even had a greater idea that the book could be published in several languages. Because she's a French Canadian, she's very sensitive to language politics, and I totally agree. Ideally, a book coming out of this session would be in 3 languages, in English, French, and Spanish, so we can reach a very large amount of people. So for the presenters, please bear in mind that you will be hearing from us about this publication. Would you like to say something about this, Francine, or you can say it later?
I think for now, nothing to have said everything. The other thing is you offered me to do something, and we share the same idea as doing a book. I am very, very interested to try something experimental, doing a book in 3 languages. It's already something like that. So that's what I.
Okay, so the issue is that perhaps what we could do, but I'm just thinking out loud, is that each participant would be responsible for the translation of his or her piece, because otherwise it would be too expensive for the book organizers to pay for all the translations. But, this is just an idea at this point. Professor Leslie Aiello, please.
Gustavo, are we going to get tea breaks, or are we going to go straight through the lunch?
Sorry?
Are we going to get breaks?
Yes, but we have the discussant intervention now, and then we'll have a 15 minutes break and come back to the next session.
Okay, I'll be short because I know we all want some coffee, but what I want to do is give you some things to think about while we're having the coffee. Now, I just put this up to give you something beautiful to look at. This piece of art is the logo for the Wcaa Foundation, and it was commissioned from a Mexican artist named Miguel Covarrubias in 1948 to represent interconnected humanity and interconnected anthropologists. And I want to step back a bit from the discussions we've had this morning and tell you a little bit about the history of the foundation in international anthropologies. Because the initiatives we've heard about this morning are wonderful, but they aren't new. The foundation was founded in 1941, and in the post-World War II decade, the foundation made the conscious intention of internationalization. Some of you may be aware of the Anthropology Today conference that was held in 1952. The foundation brought over 70 anthropologists from around the world together to talk about networking and what was needed in the field. There were a number of publications that are still classics that came out of that early meeting. But the most important thing that came out of that meeting was current anthropology. And current anthropology was the internet of the 1960s, very seriously speaking, because anthropologists wanted to be able to communicate and to network with each other. And the early issues of current anthropology actually had tear-out letters that you could correspond with the editor, and they were trying to get the dialogue going. And this is, of course, where the CA treatment comes from, which is the reply and the counter-reply that has been a successful formula, at least up until the advent of the internet as we know it today. There was a second initiative also. And for those of you in my generation, you might remember Burg-Vortenstein. The foundation used to have a castle in Austria. And the whole, the employees of the foundation in New York would move to Austria every summer and host workshop after workshop. This was during the Cold War years. And the Burg-Vortenstein meetings were one of the only places where international anthropologists could come together in a safe and very creative atmosphere. Now, unfortunately, for financial reasons, we no longer have a castle, but we still try to keep that international networking going. And one point also that Mikhail brought up that's very worrying is that many anthropologists don't actually engage with the scholarship of the countries in which they're working in. And I wanted to let everybody know that the foundation will not give a grant to a student or an established anthropologist unless they have the appropriate literature cited in the languages that are appropriate to their particular research. Now, this is just a bit of a background to show that our support for both IUAES and for Wcaa is a natural continuation of what our long-term mission has been. And in fact, we started supporting IUAES in 1948. And I think we've supported all of the congresses, save for one, since that time. And we've also provided support for the majority of the inter-congresses. And we're very happy that this initiative is occurring. But what I want to leave you with is that the foundation is coming up to its 75th anniversary in 2016, which is really quite a feat when you remember we don't raise money. We live entirely off the original $2 million endowment that Wcaa provided in 1941. So we're extremely proud of that. But we're looking at ways to move the field forward. We're looking at new initiatives, how the foundation can continue to have an impact in not only internationalizing anthropology, but also in publicizing the good work that we do. And there's two initiatives I want to tell you about. One relatively modest, and one extremely exciting to me. The modest one is in the anniversary year. We're going to be introducing a new grant program on anthropological outreach. And what this is that you, as an individual, or as the Wcaa, or the IUAS, or I hope eventually the combined group, can apply to us for money for education, outreach activities that may be training for children, for young adults, or popularization to non-anthropologists. And this will be getting going at some point within the next 12 months. Now, the very ambitious and exciting initiative we're working on is to create a news and information portal for anthropology. We're looking at this as being a Huffington Post for anthropology, where it will be an area where we will consolidate what's going on internationally in the field and make it accessible. It will also be a portal where there will be an opportunity for anthropologists to comment in real time in relation to current events that are going on. This is still in a conception stage, but I'm hoping very much that this might coalesce with some of the goals of Wcaa and goals of IUAS, and can be used as a central area where international anthropology can come together and reach not only the academy, but very importantly, reach people outside of the academy with the important things that we're doing. So we're going to be putting significant resources behind this initiative because we believe that we have to start with the bang to make sure that it reaches the level where both anthropologists and non-anthropologists feel that it's a natural place to come to see what's exciting and going on in the field. So let's go have coffee now. But what I would very much appreciate is input from anyone who's interested to help us sort of formulate these ideas and move forward. We're planning for a launch on this sometime probably within the next 12 months. And we're going to be having a paid editorial staff and run this in a very professional way. Now, one last point. When I was sitting and listening to the papers this morning, there's tremendous information there. And I really support the idea of putting out a book. But I also would hope that the Wcaa would consider putting some of these papers online as the history of the Wcaa. Because cultural memory is wonderful, but unless it's written down, it's going to be forgotten. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Leslie. We will reconvene at 10:30, so please be back in 23 minutes.